Ladies and gentlemen, we will now open the 2026 online symposium in the UN on the abduction issue. My name is Kaneko Eriko, and I will be your MC. The symposium is co-hosted by Japan, the United States, Australia, the Republic of Korea, and the European Union. Streaming of the symposium is presented on the YouTube official channel of the Japanese government headquarters for the abduction issue in Japanese, Korean, and Thai.
それではシンポジウムの開会
At the outset, Ambassador Yamazaki Kazuyuki, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary Permanent Representative of Japan to the UN, will deliver the opening remarks. Your Excellency.
His Excellency Mr. KIHARA Minoru, His Excellency Mr. Furuya Keiji, fellow permanent representatives to the United Nations, dear speakers, panelists, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to co-host today's symposium alongside the distinguished ambassadors of the United States, Australia, the Republic of Korea, and the European Union. Our collective attention and commitment play a vital role in resolving the abductions issue, and their participation highlights the continued support of the international community in addressing this critical issue. Japan has been actively working towards the immediate resolution of this issue on the international stage in close collaboration with partners, including at the United Nations. We must continue to strengthen awareness of the urgent and humanitarian nature of the abductions issue, particularly when considering the tremendous suffering that the victims and their families have endured over the years. The international community has repeatedly urged North Korea to resolve the abductions issue immediately. This call is reflected in the annual UN General Assembly resolution on the human rights situation in the DPRK, adopted by consensus by UN member states. In this regard, I would like to highlight the report issued by OHCHR last fall on the update since 2014 on the situation of human rights in the DPRK. The report noted that no progress has been made on improving the human rights situation, and there has been no resolution of the abduction issues. This assessment also underscores the urgent need to redouble our collective efforts. Today's discussion provides the valuable opportunity to hear directly from the families of the victims from Japan, the United States, and Thailand. We are also joined by leading international experts whose insight will assist in seeking every avenue towards immediate resolution and stressing its urgency to the international community. I trust that today's discussion will contribute to raising further awareness of the abductions issue in the international community and will accelerate momentum towards our common objective. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Yamazaki. Now, on behalf of the Government of Japan, Honorable Kihara Minoru, Chief Cabinet Secretary and the Minister in charge of the abduction issue, will deliver keynote remarks. I am Kihara Minoru, Chief Cabinet Secretary and Minister in charge of the abduction issue. On behalf of the Government of Japan, I would like to express my gratitude to the United States, Australia, the Republic of Korea, and the European Union for co-hosting today's symposium, as well as to the officials of the United Nations for their cooperation. Thank you very much. I would also like to extend my appreciation to all participants and viewers. The issue of abductions by North Korea remains an ongoing issue as victims continue to be deprived of their freedom and unable to return home to this day. Of the 17 Japanese citizens identified by the Government of Japan as victims of abduction by North Korea, only 5 have returned to Japan. In addition, there are many other missing people for whom the possibility of abduction cannot be ruled out. As both the victims themselves and their family members are aging, there is no time to lose in resolving the abduction issue. Furthermore, I would like to reiterate that the abduction issue is not only a matter for Japan, but also a common challenge for the international community. Among the Japanese victims, there are young people who were abducted while studying abroad. One such individual is Mr. Matsuki Kaoru, who was staying in Spain at the time. Mr. Matsuki is from Kumamoto, my home electoral district, and I have worked alongside his family to achieve his return to Japan since before I became a member of the Diet. Moreover, the report of the UN Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights in the DPRK refers to victims of abductions from 10 countries other than Japan. Today, in addition to remarks by family members of Japanese victims, you will also hear messages from families in the United States and Thailand. Amid rapidly changing international circumstances, it is more important than ever for all countries to work together to address challenges. The abduction issue is precisely one that the international community should tackle in cooperation. Prime Minister Takaichi has raised the abduction issue in meetings with the leaders of each of the countries co-hosting today, as well as at the G7 Evian Summit held last week. Prime Minister Takaichi also concurred with United Nations Secretary General Guterres, who visited Japan last month, to continue to cooperate on policies towards North Korea, including on the abduction issue. Successive United Nations High Commissioners for Human Rights have also shown continued interest in addressing this issue, including listening to the voices of the families of the victims. For almost 20 years, the United Nations General Assembly and the Human Rights Council have annually adopted resolution on the human rights situation in North Korea, which include references to the abductions issue. It is important to continue conveying the united voice of the international community. The government of Japan has been seeking understanding and cooperation on the abduction issue through every opportunity, including bilateral meetings, the United Nations framework, and other international conferences, and has received very encouraging expressions of support. I would like to take this opportunity to once again express my sincere appreciation. Above all, securing the return of Japanese abductees is a matter that Japan itself must address proactively. Prime Minister Takaichi considers the resolution of the abduction issue to be a mission entrusted to her, stating that she is determined to resolve the abduction issue by making a breakthrough in my tenure without ruling out any options, including a summit meeting with President Kim Jong-un. She also expressed her hope that Japan and North Korea will work steadily toward mutual prosperity as well as regional peace and stability. Under her strong leadership, the government of Japan is making every possible effort. I myself have directly heard the earnest feelings of the families and those involved, and I am working with determination to be the last minister in charge of the abduction issue. Today, experts will also engage in discussions on what can be done toward opening a window of opportunity for the immediate resolution of the abduction issue amid complex regional and international circumstances. I strongly hope that today's symposium will serve as an opportunity to deepen the international community's understanding of the abduction issue and to build further momentum toward its resolution. In closing, I would like to express my deepest appreciation once again to all those involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kihara. Next will be the remarks by the representatives of our co-hosts. First, Ambassador Michael Waltz, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary Representative of the United States to the United Nations.
Hello. I want to thank Ambassador Yamazaki and the government of Japan for leading today's symposium, which keeps attention where it belongs, on the victims of abductions and their families. The U.S. is proud to co-host, alongside Japan and the Republic of Korea, Australia, and the European Union. This issue demands the world's attention because it is so clear. There is no question. Parents lost children, husbands lost wives, families lost decades with their loved ones, and North Korea has still never told the truth. To the family members here today, thank you. Your courage is simply remarkable. Year after year, you have carried photographs, told your stories, and refused, absolutely refused, to let the world look away. You should never have had to become advocates. You should have your loved ones at home with you right now. But even now, you continue to tell the truth. And the United States stands with you, stands with Japan, with the Republic of Korea, and with every nation whose citizens were stolen by the DPRK. This was state-sponsored kidnapping, full stop. The DPRK stole innocent people from their families, dragged them into darkness, spent decades lying about it, and still, even today, won't tell the truth. Yokota Megumi was just 13 years old when she was taken. 13. A child just walking home from school and then disappeared and never came home. Taguchi Yaiko, a young mother, was taken from her family. Her children were robbed of their mother, and she was robbed of the life she should have lived with them. Both of them deserve to return home now. President Trump has also been clear, and he is personally invested in the release of DPRK abductees. When he met with abductee family members last October, he promised that the United States will do everything in its power to help reunite them with their loved ones. President Trump keeps his promises, and I echo that commitment today. We know this regime's playbook. North Korea has also detained our citizens. They've abused them, and they've used their lives as leverage in this sick approach to international relations. We call again for the immediate resolution of all abduction cases. The DPRK must provide a full accounting, return those still held, and give the families the truth now. This disgusting chapter of history must end, and it must end forever. The world should say plainly, and the world should join all of us in saying that no government gets to kidnap innocent people, lie about it for decades, and then expect normal treatment by the world community. To the families, you are not alone. The American people stand with you. Your courage continues to inspire us, our diplomats, and our president, all of whom are doing our utmost to return your loved ones. And we will keep pressing until every abductee is accounted for and every family gets the truth that they have been denied for far too long. Your advocacy gives hope that together we will bring them home. I commend you, we stand with you, and I thank you.
Those were remarks by Ambassador Michael Waltz. Next, we will receive remarks from Ambassador James LARSEN, Permanent Representative of Australia to the United Nations.
Thank you for joining us for this year's United Nations online symposium on the abductions issue. Australia is pleased once again to co-host this important event with Japan, the Republic of Korea, the United States, and the European Union. My name is James LARSEN, Australia's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations in New York. And this symposium continues to provide an important platform to focus international attention on serious human rights concerns in North Korea, including the long-standing abductions issue. For decades, North Korea has perpetrated grave and systemic human rights violations against its own people and nationals of other states. These have been comprehensively documented in UN proceedings, including in the 2014 Commission of Inquiry report chaired by former Justice of the High Court of Australia, Michael Kirby. The report made it absolutely clear state violence in North Korea extends beyond its borders through abductions and enforced disappearances on a troubling scale. We stand with Japan in calling for the immediate resolution to this protracted issue of abductions. The international community should not allow the gravity of these violations to fade into the background or become accepted as the status quo. We also remain alarmed that those who escape North Korea are being forced back, often into torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. States must meet their obligations under international law, including non-refoulement. Australia continues to use multilateral forums to press North Korea to respect, protect, and fulfill the human rights of its people, and we call on the international community to do the same. Accountability matters, and so does calling out a regime that prioritizes its weapons of mass destruction programs at the expense of providing for its people. With Japan and other partners, we remain closely engaged at the United Nations, including at the Human Rights Council, to strengthen scrutiny, support evidence gathering, and sustain pressure. We are concerned by North Korea's continued refusal to engage with United Nations mechanisms, including its ongoing refusal to grant access to independent experts and mandate holders. We again call on North Korea to engage seriously with the United Nations system, end the abuse of torture and mistreatment of prisoners, and move towards abolition of the death penalty. Finally, we continue to urge North Korea to engage in sincere dialogue with Japan to address the outstanding abductions issue. Thank you very much indeed for your engagement and attention.
This was Ambassador James LARSEN. Next is the remarks by Ambassador Cha Jihoon, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary Permanent Representative of the Republic of Korea to the United Nations.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the government of Republic of Korea is pleased to co-host this important event today with Japan, the United States, Australia, and the European Union. At the outset, I would like to extend my gratitude to the government of Japan for convening today's event to raise international attention on this important matter. Given the advancing age of the abductees and their families, the resolution of the issue is now more urgent than ever before. The families of abductees by the DPRK from the Republic of Korea, Japan, the United States, Thailand, and beyond have been making tireless efforts to ensure their loved ones are neither forgotten nor abandoned. In this light, the international community must align its efforts with those of the families. This is the very reason why the United Nations continue to raise the issues of abduction by the DPRK in multiple fora. The annual resolutions on DPRK human rights situations adopted by the General Assembly and the Human Rights Council consistently demand that Pyongyang immediately resolve all issues relating to the fate of the abductees. Last year, the UN high-level meeting on DPRK human rights and the reports of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights served as stark reminders that the cases of abduction continue to remain unresolved. And as the 2023 UN Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights report dedicated to enforced disappearance and abductions by the DPRK correctly states, these wounds do not heal. This must not become a forgotten issue. Indeed, the international community must maintain its solidarity until real progress is achieved. In this connection, we strongly urge the DPRK to expeditiously resolve all the painful and protracted issues related to abductees, detainees, and unrepatriated prisoners of war. This should be realized through transparent and verified victim accounting with a view toward their immediate and safe return. Furthermore, my government believes that such a meaningful resolution on these increasingly time-sensitive and difficult humanitarian issues would simultaneously advance our ongoing efforts in promotion of peace on the Korean Peninsula and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, dear families, today's symposium is not just another date on the annual UN calendar. Instead, it exemplifies our collective commitment to standing with the families. As such, we hope that the insight shared here today can help foster a new impetus to resolve these enduring issues in a rapid and just manner. To conclude, I take this opportunity to reaffirm our guiding solidarity with the families of victims, those who have demonstrated incredible persistence and bravery in their seemingly interminable quest to realize long-awaited reunions with their loved ones. Let's come together to reinvigorate our global efforts to write an end to this difficult story. Thank you.
Those were remarks by Ambassador Jihoon. Next, remarks by Ambassador Stavros LAMBRINIDIS, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary, Head of the Delegation of the European Union to the UN.
Dear friends, it is every family's worst nightmare, not only to lose a loved one, but to know that they are held against their will, out of sight but never out of mind. For the past 50 years, this has been the fate of regular citizens in Japan, whose family members were abducted by agents of the DPRK or North Korea. It may sound like the stuff of Cold War fiction, but it is only too true. And the effects of crimes committed in the 1970s continue to shape lives today. In recent years, the DPRK has gone to increasing lengths to stop any flow of information out of the country. But we know from the testimony of escapees that the human rights situation there is hard to imagine, continuing to shock the world's conscience. This is why the European Union continues to present resolutions on the DPRK to the United Nations General Assembly and Human Rights Council, so that the violations and abuses of human rights are not forgotten. These resolutions keep calling on the DPRK to immediately return all abductees, and they are supported by the whole international community. This is why the European Union remains committed to working with Japan and other partners to keep the issue at the forefront of international attention. The DPRK has a duty to listen to the victims and their families. It should address all allegations of enforced disappearances, clarify the fate and whereabouts of all disappeared persons, provide information to the families, and cooperate in returning the remains of those no longer with us. To this end, and in pursuit of such a dialogue, the European Union will continue to work with the government of Japan, with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and with the UN Special Rapporteur. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was remarks by Ambassador Stavros Lambrinidis. Next, on behalf of the Bipartisan Parliamentary Committee of the Japanese Parliament, Chairman Furuya Keiji of the Committee of Congressional Members to act for the early rescue of Japanese victims abducted by North Korea. Mr. Furuya. I am Furuya Keiji, Chairman of the Committee of Congressional Members. Since the return of only some of the Japanese abductees kidnapped by North Korea returned home 24 years ago, no concrete progress has occurred. The fact that we have to convene this international symposium again following last year plunges myself into deep remorse also as the chair of the parliamentary committee. I have been informed that Prime Minister Takaichi, who took office last October, asked President Trump for his cooperation on the abduction issue at the Japan-US summit meeting on the 19th of March and that she received the full support. Former Senator Marco Rubio, who became the Secretary of State in the second Trump administration, kindly took the lead when he was a senator when both houses of the Congress passed a resolution on a U.S. national, Mr. David Snedden, who is strongly suspected to have been abducted. Mr. Rubio had clear recognition that these abductions were not mere kidnapping but a state-sponsored terrorism, and it is of particular significance that he has become the Secretary of State. The Japan-US summit meeting this March and the meeting last year of President Trump and the families are extremely meaningful. That is because Mr. Trump has an acute awareness about the abduction issue. We, the Congressional Committee, is planning to visit Washington, D.C. in September this year as part of our annual endeavors. We will meet many members of the government and the Congress and appeal for the cooperation for the resolution of the abduction issue of both Japan and the U.S. Furthermore, we wish to once again request a meeting of the families of the U.S. citizen Mr. David Snedden and President Trump and Secretary Rubio. Why? Because despite the resolution adopted by both houses of the Congress, most of the Americans do not know of the high possibility of their own people being abducted by North Korea. If the President does meet the families of Mr. Snedden in the White House, it will be reported widely. Then it would serve as a huge pressure on Kim Jong-un, no doubt. Later today, the big brother of Mr. Snedden, Mr. James Snedden, will send his message. The perpetrator of the abductions is an abnormal dictatorial regime, North Korea, and that North Korea completely ignores the series of warnings by the international community, is absorbed in missile launches and nuclear development, is in full complicity with Russia, and in return for technology transfer, North Korea is dispatching a large number of troops, soldiers, only to be attacked and shot as targets. 2 years ago, President Putin visited North Korea and even a strategic partnership was concluded. North Korea is expected to further push ahead with its nuclear program. As for its relationship with China, in honesty, China is the enemy of a millennium, but with utmost reluctance as the gain was larger than the grudge. Following Foreign Minister Wan's visit to North Korea in April, President Xi Jinping went to North Korea on the 8th of June for the first time in 7 years, and the summit meeting was held. The reality of North Korea is neglect of human rights. The reality of worsening economic and food situations are also ignored. Illegal means are leveraged to collect financing, it scrambles to deploy missiles and nuclear weapons, and it is frantically working in this way with a desperate wish to squarely face the superpower the US on a par. That is the reality. However, this kind of abnormal actions are unlikely to continue forever, nor should we allow it to continue. Needless to say, in order to resolve the abduction of the Japanese citizens, as Prime Minister Takaichi just mentioned, she is determined to act proactively to realize the Japan-North Korea summit and to resolve the issue by her administration. The Committee of Congressional Members, we will spare no effort. What General Secretary Kim Jong-un is contemplating is to relegate the abduction issue to the past and make it forgotten. However, that should never be allowed. In Japan, we continue to spread the determination that the abduction will never be forgotten and to raise the public awareness that only the resolution of the abduction issue will lead North Korea to a brighter future. May I conclude my remarks as the chairman of the Congressional Committee for the Early Rescue of the Abductees with my prayer that we will do our utmost during the Takaichi administration by a firm international cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Furuya. We would now like to move on to the appeal by families of victims. First, we will hear from Mr. Yokota Takuya, young brother of Ms. Yokota Megumi and representative of the Association of Families of Victims Kidnapped by North Korea. Ms. Yokota Megumi was abducted by North Korea in 1977 when she was 13 years old in Niigata City of Japan. Mr. Yokota, please take the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and good morning. I am Yokota Takuya, representative of the Association of Families of Victims Kidnapped by North Korea. I express my deep gratitude to the governments of Japan, the United States, Australia, the ROK, and the EU for co-hosting this online symposium in the UN on the abduction issue. I also wish to thank the online participants for showing your solidarity with the families of victims and sharing with us the resolve to achieve the immediate and collective return of all abductees and to bring a resolution to this grave human rights issue. Of the 17 abductees recognized officially by the Japanese government, 5 were able to return in 2002 and their families in 2004. However, not a single abductee has made it back since then. North Korea, even today, is engaged in hostage diplomacy, abducting innocent citizens of other countries, depriving them of their freedom and their bond with their families. On the other hand, they are strengthening their nuclear threat, repeating ballistic missile launches, and undermining regional security. 25 million North Korean citizens are in similar situations. They have been taken away their right to flee and are confined in a prison-like country. It must be understood that the military-first policy of North Korea and the human rights issue are two sides of the same coin, causing serious problems. The only thing that we, the families of victims of abduction, are asking for is the return of our loved ones who have been abducted. Chairman Kim Jong-un is frequently seen with Kim Joo-ae, who is assumed to be his daughter and appears to care deeply for her. While offering limitless love to his own child, well understanding the importance of the bond between family members, Yokota Megumi, abducted when she was 13, has been kept separated with her family for 48 years. Megumi has suffered, and so has her mother, Sakie, from the deep pain waiting in Japan, yearning for a reunion with her daughter. Why can't he understand this agony? I lodge a strong objection and a strong demand. Please return all abductees without delay. My mother, Sakie, turned 90 last February. She is well today, but may not be so tomorrow, and is longing for reunion with Megumi. At the minimum, we demand the immediate and collective return of all abductees while the association members of the parents' generation are still active. This is non-negotiable. If our demand remains unfulfilled, we will urge the Japanese government to impose stronger sanctions against North Korea. Should that happen, the North Korean regime shall face a much more difficult socio-economic environment than they have ever had and leave behind a harsh, burdensome legacy for future generations. If the abduction issue, which is a human rights and humanitarian problem, is solved at this instance, both countries can draw a bright future for themselves. As long as our one and only objective is realized, our association will not object to the lifting of unilateral sanctions by Japanese government against North Korea or commencement of negotiation towards normalization of ties between Japan and North Korea. However, not a single abductee may be left behind. We hope that Chairman Kim Jong-un makes a wise and courageous decision, and as a leader of your nation and as a loving father, please make an audacious decision for your daughter can be proud of. We will continue our fight until all abductees return through our voice as weapon. This is a battle we cannot afford to lose. Even if the leadership of North Korea is handed over to the next generation, we will continue our pursuit. Now is the time to release all abductees. I also call upon the Japanese government to promptly realize the Japan-DPRK summit meeting and push forward with resolute diplomacy for the immediate return of all abductees. I also ask the international community to continue to stand with us and fight against North Korea's unjustified infringement of human rights as universal values of humanity. Thank you.
Thank you to Mr. Yokota. Next, we will hear from the eldest son of the abductee, Ms. Yaguchi Yaiko, and the Secretary General of the Association of Families of Victims Kidnapped by North Korea, Mr. Izuka Koichiro. Ms. Taguchi Yaiko was abducted by North Korea in 1978 when she was 22 years old. Mr. Izuka. Good evening, good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. May I express my gratitude to you all for maintaining your interest on the abduction issue and for your long and kind support. I am the Secretary General of the Associated Families, Iizuka Koichiro. My mother, Taguchi Yaeko, went missing 48 years ago on June 29, 1978, leaving behind myself at age 1 and my 2-year-old sister. Her whereabouts remain unknown for as long as 24 years since then. At the Japan-North Korea summit meeting in September 2002, North Korea admitted the adoption of her. However, at the same time, it explained that she was killed in a traffic accident in North Korea in 1986. Later on, the investigation by Japan exposed numerous inconsistencies in the explanations and documents presented by North Korea, and that no proof of her death existed. It is not only Yaeko-san. Out of the 17 abductees identified by the government of Japan, 12 victims have not returned even now. About these 12 victims yet to return, North Korea has explained that 8 have died and 4 have never entered North Korea. But all explanation included numerous unnatural and contradictory elements, and there was no proof of their death. The too longer time of more than 40 years have passed since the kidnapping, and little time is left for the resolution. If the victims held in North Korea and their families waiting for their return in Japan both are not reunited in Japan while alive and healthy, it would not be a genuine resolution. However, so extremely regrettably, in the last few years, family members waiting for their return in Japan have passed away. In 2020, Mr. Yokota Shigeru and Miss Arimoto Kayoko. In 2025, Mr. Arimoto Akihiro passed away. In 2021, the big brother of Miss Taguchi Yaeko and my adoptive parent, Mr. Iizuka Shigeo, passed away. The only surviving family member of the parents' generation is the mother of Miss Yokota Megumi, Miss Yokota Sakie, at 90 years old. The deceased members of the Association of Families can no longer see their beloved family again. They are unable to see the smiling faces of their sons, daughters, or brothers and sisters. There is a limit to human longevity, only natural. However, most of their lives have been spent detained in North Korea, all the life and time that should have been enjoyed as a given, such as sharing the joy of the growth of family members and life events or sharing sadness, have been robbed by North Korea for absolutely no reason, and that such a situation is continuing for more than 40 years. I continue to be furious about the situation. At the moment, the average age of the abductees waiting to be rescued in North Korea is 76 years old. If the lives of the abductees and their families are going to end without being reunited, we can only continue to hate North Korea and to see North Korea with outrage. As part of our international collaboration efforts, the Association of Families have traveled to the U.S. almost annually, have met the members of the Congress and the government, have met the UN people and explained our opinions and policies. Our messages are as follows. Number 1, in terms of Japan's negotiations with North Korea, we wish to give priority to the abduction issue more than nuclear missile because there is a time constraint. If going forward, the Japan-North Korea negotiation move ahead of the U.S.-North Korea negotiations, please accept that the talks on the abduction will go ahead of the nuclear and missile issues. The abduction issue is a matter of life, that there is a limit on the time. It must be resolved as soon as possible. Please understand this point. And our second message, if the U.S.-North Korea negotiation goes ahead of the Japan-North Korea talks, please do not fail to raise the abduction issue. If the abduction of the Japanese nationals are not resolved, that is, if all the abductees are not returned immediately and together, please understand that Japan will not offer any assistance to North Korea whatsoever. Such are our messages. And finally, my request. I ask the government of Japan to do everything in your power in order to realize the Japan-North Korea summit meeting at the earliest possible time. Acknowledge that there is almost no time left for us families. No pretext or excuses are needed. Please rescue the lives of the Japanese whose lives have been destroyed. Chairman Kim Jong-un, please break from the unfortunate past. Make the bold decision to return all the abductees immediately and simultaneously. After the economic sanctions are lifted, please pursue economic assistance and collaboration with the international community and proceed towards a new constructive future. I look forward to the brave decision by Chairman Kim Jong-un. The position of the Association of Families is, if all the abductees are returned immediately and simultaneously, we do not intend to extract secret information from the returned abductees, nor shall we oppose the normalization of diplomatic relations between Japan and North Korea. All we, the families, are asking for is to spend the limited number of the remaining days with the abductees in peace in Japan. That is our only wish. All I want is to see my mother just once. Thank you for your attention.
飯塚さん。
Thank you, Mr. Izuka. Next, let us hear from Ms. Yoshimi Miho, Vice Chairman of the Family Association Missing Persons Probably Related to the DPRK and elder sister of Ms. Akita Miwa, whose disappearance may have been caused by North Korea's abduction. Ms. Akita Miwa went missing in 1985 when she was 21 years old. Please go ahead. I am the elder sister of Akita Miwa, a missing person for whom the possibility of abduction by North Korea cannot be ruled out. My name is Yoshimi Miho. Thank you for this opportunity to deliver my remarks at this symposium. My younger sister disappeared after she left her friend in front of the gate of a university in Kobe on December 4th, 1985. On the next day, her shoes and bag were found on the beach of a small cove on the Japan seaside, 150 kilometers from Kobe. It is an isolated location known only to local residents. The police suspected suicide and had searched the waters for 3 days, but found no trace of her. Earlier in February of the same year, Am Myung-jong, an agent of North Korea, had been arrested in the Republic of Korea. It appears that the police across the nation had already been briefed that Japanese nationals were being abducted by North Korean agents in Japan. The police also searched the Seto inland seaside of Kobe, but unfortunately, my sister has never been found. There is no proof that she is in North Korea. In Japan, there are systems such as the family register and certificate of residence to identify people and their place of abode. In order to obtain a driver's license or passport in Japan, it is necessary to use such systems. But there is no indication that she had used such systems. Since her sudden disappearance, 40 years have passed. She was 21 then. She would be 62 today. The Investigation Commission on Missing Japanese Probably Related to North Korea, a not-for-profit organization, began to receive reports on similar cases of people suddenly disappearing around 2002 when 5 abductees returned to Japan. In many of the cases, the family members are not aware of any reason for their loved ones to disappear, and there is no evidence of abduction. After North Korea admitted abduction of people from Japan, operational manuals for agents assigned to abduction missions have been found, which mentions procedures to stage the incidents to appear as suicide, as was the case involving my sister. There are, in fact, several victims whose cases were disguised as suicide. In 2012, the police reported that there are approximately 870 missing persons for whom the possibility of abduction by North Korea cannot be ruled out. Given that every year in Japan between 1,000 to 2,000 missing persons remain unaccounted for, the assumption released by the police that there have been 870 people missing between 1948 and 2003, possibly abducted by North Korea, is not without grounds. The time lost for those who were taken away in their teens and 20s can never be gained back. You all know too well the gravity of the human rights situation in North Korea. We, the family, are deeply concerned over how the victims are treated in their daily lives under such circumstances. The victims have been deprived of their dreams and freedom, being forced to live against their will in North Korea. The least we can do is to let them spend the time they have left peacefully back home. We respectfully ask the government of Japan to save the victims. We respectfully ask the governments around the world for their support and cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you to Ms. Yoshimi. Next is from the United States. The big brother of Mr. David Snedden, Mr. James Snedden, has his comments. Mr. David Snedden went missing in August 2004 while studying in China and was on a trip to Yunnan province, and he is considered likely to have been abducted by North Korea. Mr. Snedden.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear sympathizers for all those caught in human rights atrocities, but most especially dear beloved family members and victims of abduction crimes perpetrated by the DPRK. My heart reaches out to each of you. My hopes and my prayers continue with you. I hope today's message will be heard clearly, carefully, and that it will strike a passionate chord deep in the hearts of all listeners. My name is James Snedden. I'm the older brother of David Lewis Snedden. David Snedden has been missing since August 2004. That's now approaching 22 years. To state that seems surreal. My family, especially my aged parents, are deeply exacerbated that yet there is no resolution to David's case. These days, I would say there's little activity, let alone any earnest desire to resolve his abduction. David's story is similar to others, taken in the prime of his life, removed from family, friends, and all that is familiar, forced into repression, forced into marriage, forced into servitude to despotic powers. It's the cruelest, most inhumane kind of story. The kind of story where power and cruelty reign supreme, and benevolence, empathy, and kindness are as available as clean air during a firestorm. In considering the content of my talk today, my mind caught hold of recent dialogue I've witnessed in political circles, which is that of the most basic of human rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The United States' Declaration of Independence states the following: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that amongst these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted amongst men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. The right to life, the right to choose freely of anyone's constraints, the right to worship how and whom we please, all these are basic liberties granted by the God above." This declaration from what at the time was a tyrannical kingdom or government, clearly aligned under the premise that these said rights are God-given unalienable rights. Yet there are those who suggest these rights are provided for by governments, and therein is the debate. If these rights are government provided versus governments protected, then it's reasonable to conclude that governments can and will oppress, restrict, or altogether remove them. This is exactly what North Korea has done to my brother, but most regrettably and unfortunately to its very own citizens. Why does this come about, you may ask? For me, it's simply because they don't view any greater power over their own government to which is owned accountability. Or said differently, it's not the government's role to safeguard these most basic human rights. Government's role is to whimsically, randomly, and even cruelly grant or withhold these human rights for the purpose of power, control, and servitude. So my question to the audience is this: are we believers that governments everywhere, through the power of the populace, are to protect and preserve those rights as provided for by divine providence? Or are we numbered with those who believe governments provide for these rights and therefore can restrict or retract these rights altogether? You see, this becomes a simple logical conclusion in my mind. When you believe these rights are God-endowed, you know you must protect and provide for them unfailingly. Contrarily, at some level, a government must sidestep a supreme being in order to remove these rights from other humans. I think that's the only conclusion one can reach. So my wonderment now is this: it's pretty easy to conclude where the leadership of the DPRK sits on the subject. Where does the United States government sit on this issue? Where does it sit regarding my brother specifically and the other beleaguered and oppressed people of North Korea? Do you believe these are protected rights for all humans born to the planet? Do you have the power to show by legislation, law, and more importantly action, the flag of freedom for all people everywhere? What about for my brother? Are you okay standing by as a U.S. citizen, multilingual, and able to offer an amazing bridge of culture and capability, bound for law school, has his unalienable rights snatched and destroyed like a pesky ant on the ground? It's time to do more. President Trump, hear our voice. It's time to do more. Kim Jong-un, it's clear to the world you just want to be recognized and your country to be seen as powerful and relevant. You will never achieve that goal by building bombs and missiles. The irony is you actually could achieve that by turning 180 degrees and do the opposite of what's being done today. Free your people mentally, socially, and intellectually. Recall your own experience with a free-thinking society while schooling in Switzerland. Return back to your people those God-given and government-protected unalienable rights. For it's a free people that is the foundation of innovation, prosperity, and continued development and improvement. For the sake of your dear people, and of course, for all abductees and especially my brother David Lewis Snedden, give back their freedom and their rights provided under God, and see the amazing miracle that would happen to your beautiful country. Don't be afraid of that. Embrace it. You could change the history of North Korea forever.
That was the appeal by Mr. James Snedden. Thank you very much. Finally, from Thailand, we have received a message by Mr. Banjo Panchoy, nephew of Ms. Anocha Panchoy, who went missing in Macau in 1978 and is considered to have been abducted by North Korea. Hello. I am the nephew of Anocha Panchoy, a Thai woman who was abducted by North Korea 48 years ago. I am participating today as a representative of our family. To this day, we are without any clue on her whereabouts, and we don't even know if she is still alive. Anocha went to Macau to work, and there she disappeared. Our family discovered that she has been missing since May 21st, 1978, through a letter we received around June of that year. When news came that Anocha had disappeared, we were despaired. All we could do was to wait, hoping for her return. Back then, it was extremely difficult to contact someone or visit the authorities to seek help. Further, with limited financial means, we had no choice but to wait for her, praying for her return. Then, on November 1st, 2005, when Anocha's older brother Sukam was watching the ITV 7:30 p.m. evening news, the journalist on the screen reported that a Thai woman by the name of Anocha had been abducted by North Korea. My father immediately conveyed to family members and relatives that Anocha had been found, that she had been abducted by North Korea. We were overjoyed by the discovery that she is alive, and we were saying to each other that she will eventually return. The next day, my father and I went to the Sankampen City Hall to report to the mayor the news. We then went to the broadcaster ITV to inquire the source of information of the news they had aired the night before. Soon after, the broadcaster sent a journalist to our house to interview myself and my father. After the news was aired, the Foreign Ministry of Thailand sent a representative to our family to discuss measures to be taken. Around the same timing, the Japanese government sent a representative to our home to discuss the matter and invited my father and myself to a gathering of families of abductees, a symposium. At that symposium, we were given an opportunity to exchange views with Japanese families and to encourage each other. 21 years have passed since. Every day, our hope diminishes. I have submitted documents to several organizations seeking support. They have replied that they will do whatever is possible to help. But those are merely words of sympathy, and no organization has contacted us back since. I think it is because Anocha is a woman from a rural area. That is probably why we are not receiving support. Today, our wish as family is to find out whether Anocha is truly in North Korea. Even if she is no longer alive, as long as we can receive her ashes in urn and confirm they are hers through DNA testing, we would be relieved. If only we can confirm that Anocha truly was in North Korea. To conclude, without having received any further information on Anocha, our last hope is the Japanese government and the Japanese organizations that support abductees. Please give us hope. Please help us and our family. Thanks to the continued support by organizations that have not abandoned Anocha Panchoy and her family, we, as family, still have not given up hope. I take this opportunity to express our gratitude to your support. Thank you.
This was the message by Mr. Ban John. These were the appeals by the families of the victims. Thank you. Going on to the panel discussion. The moderator is an expert of the Korean Peninsula situation and international politics of East Asia, Professor Nishino Junya of Keio University. Professor Nishino. Thank you for the introduction. I am Nishino of Keio University. I have the honor to serve as the moderator. The topic of this symposium is opening a window of opportunity for the earliest possible resolution of the abduction issue. In order to comprehensively resolve the issues of abduction, nuclear missile issues, and to normalize the relationship with North Korea is the basic policy of the government of Japan. In particular, the abductees themselves and the families are aging, and abduction is a humanitarian matter with lives at stake. In Japan, as of October last year, Prime Minister Takaichi took office, and the Prime Minister has said that she is prepared to directly engage with Chairman Jong-un. President Trump, when he came here to Japan, did have a meeting with the families of the abductees, and the President expressed his full support for the resolution of this issue. Meanwhile, North Korea has been sending troops to Russia for its aggression against Ukraine, providing weapons and ammunition. The military alliance is strengthening. In terms of North Korea's relationship with China, Chairman Kim Jong-un visited China in September. In addition to that, this month, President Xi Jinping visited North Korea, and then air traffic, so passenger train services are now being resumed. In February of this year, the Workers' Party Congress, the 9th Workers' Party Congress, was held, and the 5-year economic plan and progress in North Korea missile development were announced. And they described that the hardline policy toward the U.S. will be maintained. But it also went on to say that there is no reason not to get along with the U.S. if U.S. withdraw its policy of hostility. But the relationship with the Republic of Korea, it is an eternal enemy. And regarding relationship with Japan, there is no concrete moves at this moment for any willingness to engage in dialogue. Against this backdrop, we would like to discuss today in the panel discussion how to realize the earliest possible resolution of abduction issue. And there are 3 points, if I may suggest. First of all, the internal external situation surrounding North Korea. How do each of the panelists assess the current situation and how future developments might open the window of opportunity? Second, what approaches toward North Korea might be effective for us to open the window and create an opportunity? And the third point is regarding the violation of fundamental rights. This is universal international challenge and how each of the country can work together to deal with the situation. These are the suggested topics. So first of all, introduction of the panelists. Joining us from Republic of Korea, representative of the UN Human Rights Office in Seoul, Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mr. James Heenan. Representative Heenan has been working on human rights matters at the United Nations for many years and is now dealing with the human rights issues of North Korea as the representative of the office in Seoul. Thank you very much for your participation. Next, joining us from Washington, D.C., United States, Senior Fellow of the Maureen and Mike Mansfield Foundation, Mr. Bruce Klingner. Senior Fellow Klingner is an expert of the Korean Peninsula and the security in Asia. He has engaged in the analysis and researches at think tanks and U.S. government agencies for long. He is widely known for his expertise on Northeast Asian matters. Thank you for your kind participation. Last but not least, also joining us from Washington, D.C., United States, is the President and CEO of the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea, Mr. Greg Scalato. President Scalato has worked as an expert of human rights issues in North Korea for many years and is active in extensive areas, including frequent appearances in public hearings at the U.S. Congress and in the media. Thank you very much for joining us. So first of all, may I invite each of you for your initial remarks with the topics that I suggest in mind, maybe about 4 minutes or so for your initial remarks. That will be followed by a session of questions and answers as much as time permits. So first of all, Mr. Heenan, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting the UN Human Rights Office to speak at this event, and my respect to the family members of the abducted who are online with us today. I want to speak from the perspective of the United Nations. Enforced disappearances in and by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea are one of the most serious human rights violations possible and possible international crimes on which our office works. Conservative estimates see about 100,000 people have been forcibly disappeared from countries outside the DPRK, including abductions from Japan. The office is aware of enforced disappearance by the DPRK of nationals from a number of countries, as has been mentioned: China, France, Italy, Lebanon, Malaysia, the Netherlands, the Republic of Korea, Romania, Singapore, Thailand, and the United States. The majority have come from the Republic of Korea. And I have to say that the extent of enforced disappearances inside the DPRK itself is even more significant and is unfortunately largely unknown. An enforced disappearance is one of the gravest incidents that we have under international law. And I mention this because I'm a lawyer and we do a lot of legal work in the office. It is a very serious human rights violation. It's a crime against humanity if part of a widespread and systematic attack against a population. It's also one of the very few standalone international crimes under international law, along with things like torture and piracy. It's an ongoing crime, which means that it doesn't end until the fate of the disappeared person is known. And most importantly, well, not most importantly, but very importantly, the disappeared are victims of the crime, as are their families. And we are thus dealing with many hundreds of thousands of victims under international law. We in our office in Seoul have worked for many years interviewing victims and families, engaging with member states and analysing the situation legally and bringing international attention to this issue, as we're doing here today in this event. In terms of a way forward, the High Commissioner for Human Rights has essentially called for 6 things from the DPRK. The first is, as many speakers have said, to acknowledge that there are people who have been forcibly disappeared by the DPRK. And it's important to note that this is one of the crimes that the DPRK has in the past at least acknowledged to have happened. Second is to take immediate steps to end these violations, to return the victims to their families and provide information about the victims to their families. The third is to investigate and hold to account those responsible. The fourth is to give families some reparations, which includes memorialization and compensation. And in the meantime, to remove any undue restrictions on communication between those enforceably disappeared and their families. Finally, it's also important to remember that we call for reforms to the system in DPRK to make sure that these terrible, terrible things never happen again. The advanced age of those who have disappeared, as has been said, and of their families, and of the perpetrators, actually, means that this is a matter of the utmost urgency. The issue of enforced disappearance is, of course, part of a broader human rights crisis in the DPRK. And here we're talking about executions, arbitrary detention, extreme restrictions on freedom of movement and speech, torture, and violations of the right to health and food. As has been mentioned, last September, our High Commissioner assessed the last 10 years as, quote, a lost decade, unquote, noting that despite some small improvements in the DPRK, overall, the situation has not improved, and in some cases, such as enforced disappearances, it has become worse as families continue to suffer for decades without receiving any information. So moving forward, action on enforced disappearance needs to, first of all, be urgent, primarily in finding ways to open doors and engagement with the DPRK. Second, it needs to be in line with international law, which is very, very clear on the issue of enforced disappearance. Third, we need to look at the perpetrators of these crimes, but we also need to respond to the needs of victims. And that's why it's so good to have family members in this event today. Fourth, we need to take into account the broader human rights situation in the DPRK, which I've mentioned. And finally, I think the number of countries that have had their nationals forcibly disappeared, we need those countries to be working together and to be coordinated. Thank you, Professor Nishino.
Thank you very much, Mr. Heenan. May I invite Senior Fellow Mr. Klingner?
Thank you for the opportunity to participate in such a distinguished event on such a meaningful and important topic. For the international community, the abductee issue is one of long-standing, egregious human rights abuses and North Korean refusal to address and resolve its responsibility for heinous actions against human decency. But for the families of the abductees, it is the decades-long heartbreak of anguish and uncertainty of the fate of their loved ones, of an empty chair at the dinner table, of the missed special events of a lifetime. As a father and grandfather, I can only imagine the emotional torment of the days, the months, the years of the absence of cherished family members. I wish I could offer an easy solution to this intractable problem. Unfortunately, despite the best efforts of the families and of successive government administrations, North Korea refuses to engage in even basic levels of communication with the Japanese, US, and South Korean governments. Prime Minister Takaichi, like her predecessors, is commendably working hard to address the abduction issue, as are numerous Japanese government officials. However, Pyongyang has conditioned any meetings with Tokyo on a promise that neither denuclearization nor the abduction issue will be discussed. Since the last bilateral US-North Korean meeting in October 2019, Washington has made countless efforts to engage with Pyongyang, including a personal letter from President Trump to Kim Jong-un, only to be repeatedly rejected. President Trump has made clear that he would like to meet again with Kim Jong-un, but despite conjectures that he might do so during his trips to Asia in late 2025 and 2026, no meeting occurred. While Pyongyang has refrained from direct criticism of Trump and has not totally rejected the possibility of renewed engagement, it has shown no eagerness to do so and has made clear the conditions Washington would have to accept. North Korea is in a far stronger position than during 2018 and 2019, given the massive benefits it has received from Russia, the resumption of trade with China, and Pyongyang's lucrative cyber crimes, all of which undermine the impact of international sanctions. Since the U.S. foreign policy has been focused elsewhere than on North Korea, it is uncertain what kind of agreement Washington may seek with Pyongyang. The United States should not seek the easy path of a simple diplomatic agreement that merely provides the illusion of success. Instead, Washington must insist on a well-crafted agreement that actually reduces the North Korean security threat and addresses the concerns of our allies. The recent Trump administration national security and national defense strategies reflect a downgrading of human rights in U.S. foreign policy objectives. When engaging with North Korea, the U.S. should insist that the abduction issue is addressed during negotiations. Given the diplomatic impasse with Pyongyang, some experts have advised abandoning North Korean denuclearization, reducing U.S. sanctions on the regime, and neglecting human rights issues, including the abduction issue, in the vain hope of re-engaging Pyongyang. Doing so would be a mistake by making concessions and losing leverage even prior to entering the negotiating room. Moreover, since such actions would run counter to numerous UN resolutions, U.S. laws, and the values of the Japanese and U.S. people. Several Japanese proverbs reflect the need to remain unbowed despite repeated failure and the necessity to continue striving to achieve important objectives. Another Japanese proverb advises, if you're in a hurry, go the long way around, meaning that sometimes an indirect route may be faster in the end. A direct confrontational approach with North Korea, which demands initial resolution of the most difficult issues for both sides, may only lead to continued deadlock and lack of resolution on any issue. Instead, it may be necessary to begin with issues of mutual advantage to both sides, such as discussing confidence and security building measures to lower tensions and reduce the potential for inadvertent military clashes or even stumbling into a full-scale war. Once progress on these and other mutually advantageous issues is achieved, more difficult issues may then have greater potential for achieving progress and resolution. Admittedly, this is not a satisfactory approach for those seeking quick resolution of the abduction issue, particularly the aging families who seek being reunited with loved ones or at least closure of their fates. But it may be the most pragmatic way forward. Above all, we must continue all efforts to resolve this issue and bring comfort to the families.
Mr. Klinger, Senior Fellow, thank you. Next, President Scarato, you have the floor.
Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me to speak today. My heart goes out to the family members who have been awaiting answers for decades. The passing of all but one of the parents of the still missing 12 Japanese abductees highlights the urgency of the task ahead. However, other senior members of the families are still alive. Moreover, there may be many more surviving parents, as North Korean abduction cannot be ruled out for at least 869 missing Japanese nationals. Information on those suspected victims is available on the website of the Japanese National Police Agency. While refusing to open up and reform, the DPRK has recently procured billions of dollars through cybercrime and exportation of weapons, munitions, and mercenaries to the Middle East and Eastern Europe, in direct violation of applicable UN and other sanctions. High-risers, imported cars, cell phones, coffee shops, pizza parlors, beer halls, and high heels may be a familiar sight in the capital city of Pyongyang, but only those from the core class under the ruthless, loyalty-based Songbun social discrimination system can reside in North Korea's seat of power and privilege. While Pyongyang thrives, people outside the city starve. The wavering and hostile classes face a perennial humanitarian crisis, with 1/3 of North Korea's children suffering from malnutrition. Elite cherishing and window dressing fueled by UN sanctions busting will not bring normalcy to the DPRK, but an earnest and transparent pursuit of a resolution of the abduction issue would be a big step in the right direction. Despite the pledge made through the May 2014 Stockholm Agreement, the DPRK has not delivered on its promises. Before securing verification instrumental in complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization, mutual trust is of the essence. Of all of the egregious violations that turned the DPRK into an incessant human rights wasteland, the abduction issue could provide an opening toward the resolution of the country's nuclear, missile, humanitarian, and human rights conundrum, as well as an environment conducive to dialogue and trust building. From the DPRK's viewpoint, there are two fundamental impediments to earnest engagement on abductions. First, abduction is linked to the legacy of the current leader's predecessors. Second, the abductees, forced to provide instruction and fabricated identities to DPRK clandestine agents dispatched overseas, have possessed very sensitive information. In the midst of an ideological realignment coupled with a significant restructuring of intelligence and security agencies, the DPRK leader may be prone to engaging on an issue created prior to his own rule. What benefits could the DPRK have from bringing closure to the abduction issue? While the DPRK has been procuring billions of dollars through its exportation of instability and violence, the conflicts it fuels will surely come to an end. A long-term strategic vision securing the survival of both the DPRK's regime and its people will require a reasonable degree of international legitimacy and normalization. Failure to resolve the abduction issue would likely render such normalization impossible. If willing to engage on the issue, in addition to improved relations with Japan and the possible easing of unilateral sanctions, North Korea could build trust on the international stage, which could lead to more beneficial engagement on different topics. Targeted incentives encouraging DPRK cooperation may include adequately monitored humanitarian assistance, which should be framed not as concessions, but as reciprocal trust-building measures within a clearly defined negotiation framework. The DPRK's abduction of nationals of 14 countries reveals a broader pattern of state-sponsored human rights abuse. UN member states impacted by abductions should coordinate legal and diplomatic responses to add pressure and bring closure to the issue. The abduction issue must be addressed not only geographically, but also thematically, framing the issue within the established legal and conceptual frameworks of human trafficking, as defined by Article 3 of the 2000 Palermo Protocol, also including child and sex trafficking, could offer additional avenues for international advocacy, legal redress, and pressure put on the DPRK. Such framing could invoke international legal frameworks and leverage reporting mechanisms such as the UNODC, the U.S. Trafficking in Persons Reports, and the Office of the UN Special Rapporteur on Trafficking in Persons. While the abductees' families treasure precious memories of happy times and long for closure and reunion, we will continue to do our utmost best to reach full disclosure and to emphasize that, for the DPRK leadership, resolving the abduction issue is the righteous path, morally, ethically, legally, and politically. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scalato. Thank you very much for the initial remarks by all the three experts. We have a few minutes left. It's like 20 minutes, but we have the time for questions and answers. First of all, about the international situation, external situation of North Korea, Mr. Scalato and Mr. Klingler, if I may. At the moment, looking at the situation surrounding North Korea, China and Russia, and the relationship with North Korea is becoming stronger, and that is attracting attention. But if North Korea going forward decides to seek help and cooperation from countries other than Russia and China, what might be the trigger or the lever? And then, vis-a-vis Japan, if they might make a demand to Japan, what might they demand? May I start with Mr. Scalato, please, and then also to Mr. Klingner, Senior Fellow, if I may. The U.S. and North Korea's relationship was referred to. Going forward, if North Korea decides to talk with the U.S. about nuclear missile, what would be the trigger or the reason to encourage them? Or what might be the return that they will demand? Or what might be the size of the potential concession of North Korea? That would be my question to Senior Fellow Klingner. Since time is limited, please kindly be a bit concise, if I may ask you. So, Mr. Scalato, please.
The DPRK's military-industrial complex, the most lucrative sector of its royal palace economy, has been procuring tens of billions of dollars by exporting ballistic missiles, small arms, munitions, including artillery shells, rocket-propelled grenades, tunneling technology, and even combatants from the Korean People's Army, 11th Corps, and the Reconnaissance General Bureau to the Middle East and Europe, supporting wars of aggression against Israel and Ukraine. The end of these conflicts and the monitoring of the status quo post-bellum will make it increasingly difficult for the DPRK to secure hard currency through its exportation of instability and violence. This, coupled with the pressure faced by fellow members of the axis of tyranny, including Venezuela, Cuba, Belarus, and Iran, may provide the DPRK with an incentive to overcome isolation and engage with countries other than Russia or China. What the DPRK wants from Japan is full diplomatic recognition and reparations on par with those provided to the ROK through the 1965 Treaty on Basic Relations between Japan and the Republic of Korea, especially now that Chapter 1, Article 2 of the revised 2026 DPRK Constitution formalizes the separation of the two Koreas. The DPRK may claim that it is entitled to both diplomatic normalization and reparations. However, the year is 2026, and the DPRK has been threatening Japan, the ROK, and the entire Northeast Asian region with its development of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. The DPRK's proliferation of instability and violence has become a global threat, and yet senior DPRK officials, including the leader's sister, have stated willingness to engage with Japan, but insisted that nukes, missiles, and abductions are off the table. That is going to make it very difficult for Japan and the DPRK to identify a zone of possible agreement conducive to negotiated results. In order to reach a resolution to the abduction issue, Japan will have to find a way to move North Korea away from positional negotiating based on refusal to discuss critical issues to negotiation based on its fundamental interests, including the easing of bilateral sanctions, humanitarian and economic assistance, and eventual diplomatic normalization, followed by expanded investment and economic relations.
ありがとうございました。続き
Thank you very much. Mr. Klingner, may I ask you?
North Korea has developed and continues to develop a wide array of nuclear and missile weapons. Nuclear weapons are tactical and strategic, and the missiles are increasingly sophisticated, covering all ranges that threaten South Korea, Japan, U.S. bases in the Pacific, and the United States homeland. Some of these warheads are maneuverable and can evade Allied missile defenses. Some of the potential triggers for re-engaging with North Korea would be a cessation of the Russian-Ukrainian war, though unfortunately that does not appear likely in the near term. When that war ends and Russia no longer needs the very massive North Korean military assistance that Pyongyang has been providing, then the regime may look elsewhere for economic benefits. Another potential trigger would be a major United States speech, perhaps by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, which articulates that the U.S. is very interested in re-engaging with North Korea on an array of issues, and articulating what issues would be of interest, what potential areas of agreement, as well as areas that the U.S. could provide assistance to North Korea, though the U.S. should not provide any concessions prior to entering the negotiating room. Also, the United States could identify and announce a point of contact, a senior U.S. government official who would engage directly with North Korea if Pyongyang would agree. In talking with a person with contacts in North Korea, they said that North Korea is looking for such indications from the United States beyond simply President Trump saying he wants to re-engage with Pyongyang. Also, the U.S. could identify areas that it could ease sanctions, though it should not ease those sanctions until reciprocal North Korean actions. North Korea might be willing to initially talk about limits on its nuclear and missile forces. That would be a good start, but we should never abandon the end goal of denuclearization as required by 11 UN resolutions and U.S. laws. Thank you.
Mr. Klinger, thank you very much. We go to the second point. The most important point for this symposium is approaches towards North Korea to resolve the abductions issue. I will ask Mr. Heenan and Mr. Klinger to respond to the following questions under the second theme. The Association of Family mentioned that they want all of the abductees to be returned collectively while the parents' generation is still alive, and then they would be prepared not to rule out humanitarian assistance or lifting of Japan's unilateral sanctions. So, Mr. Heenan, the United Nations assess the needs for North Korea to improve the human rights situation. Where are the areas and what level is the need? And in order for North Korea to open up a window to UN bodies and to donor nations, what kind of approach do you think is appropriate? And to Mr. Klinger, the Japanese government wants to comprehensively resolve outstanding issues, including abduction, nuclear and missile issues. Japan, United States, and the Republic of Korea continue to pursue the denuclearization of North Korea. But currently, discussions on nuclear and missile issues and abductions issues are sort of considered separately. How can we link them? What forms of leverage does Japan possess for achieving progress on abductions, and how might such leverage be utilized in practice? So, we'd appreciate if you could share your views on such matters. Again, Mr. Klinger. First, Mr. Heenan, please.
Yes, well, I mean, for the DPRK, international assistance and cooperation are certainly needed to improve many areas, and all areas have an impact on human rights at the end of the day. We encourage the DPRK to accept technical assistance from the United, including from our office, to get the knowledge that they need on what their obligations are under human rights towards the population and how to respect them. And I would say that these obligations have been voluntarily assumed by DPRK. They haven't been forced on the country. They have decided to ratify these conventions. There are already some moves in that direction. Food aid is needed at some times in the country, although less likely at the present moment. But assistance in renovating food production and distribution systems would certainly help in dealing with the persistent right to food issues in the country. It's a similar story with the provision of health services, where there has been actually quite a lot of building undertaken in terms of health centres. But again, the question is the quality of the health services and also things like access to medicine and drugs. So these things are about knowledge of the government about what it needs to do and resources to be able to do it. And we see that in many countries. But on some of the hardest issues, which are the ones that our office deals with, issues like torture and arbitrary detention, and indeed enforced disappearance, the focus there needs to be a focus on acquiring knowledge and maybe allocating resources, but above all, it's about political will. And an issue common to all of these in DPRK is the issue of transparency. DPRK does not produce the data on many of the issues that we monitor and many of the people here today monitor, and there's no independent monitoring bodies inside the country at the moment, and very few international actors inside the country. So that is a very key barrier at the moment. On approaches to opening engagement, DPRK engages with the United Nations human rights mechanisms, and this engagement is slowly increasing. For this reason, UN mechanisms are a key opportunity in the short and midterm to broadening engagement in the country, I think. And for the UN, in every situation, we pursue a two-track approach. We monitor and promote accountability of human rights violations, but we also do that alongside engagement because we engage using the information we get from our monitoring. DPRK is a member state of the United Nations and participates in many fora. Like all member states, they care about their human rights reputation. And in terms of bilateral relations, I would say that that's for each member state to decide. But I would like to say to those member states that enjoy good relations with the DPRK, maybe they could elevate the human rights issue in their bilateral agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Hina. May I ask Mr. Klingner? So nuclear missile challenges in addition to that.
More importantly, there's even higher urgency to resolve the abduction issue.
It's on North Korea about whether to pursue a very large, comprehensive agreement addressing all of the issues of concern to the countries, including the United States, South Korea, and Japan, or a series of smaller, more defined agreements. On the one hand, the comprehensive agreement would put all issues, including human rights and the abduction issue, on the table, along with nuclear and missile issues, and economic and other benefits that one could provide to North Korea. And in that way, have perhaps concessions in one area lead to achieving objectives in other areas. Others argue that that is too difficult, it's unlikely to occur, and that instead a series of smaller, more defined agreements should be achieved. What I would describe as a large 100-yard agreement implemented in 5-yard increments versus a series of smaller 5-yard agreements. In any of these, we would face difficulties given North Korea's violation of previous agreements, as well as the mistrust amongst the countries. Even just focusing on nuclear issues, there's the debate as to whether to focus on issues that could threaten the American homeland only, or also missiles that can more likely attack South Korea and Japan. In all of these agreements, the U.S. and its allies could offer economic concessions, diplomatic concessions, or benefits, including formal recognition of North Korea, the reduction of sanctions, and also humanitarian assistance, developmental assistance. However, in all those cases, we would have to have very intrusive verification measures, such as we had with arms control treaties between NATO and the Soviet Union. And we would also have to have strict compliance on how any kind of assistance is distributed to the North Korean people to prevent the North Korean regime from simply absorbing it and using it as a profit for the regime. So unfortunately, there's no easy solution, and whether we have a push for large agreements or a series of small agreements, unfortunately right now it's a moot argument because North Korea has refused even to engage at the most basic diplomatic level with the United States, Japan, and South Korea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senior Fellow Mr. Klingner. And then, if I may, the third point, this is about international efforts. May I ask Mr. Scalato and Mr. Heenan, starting with Mr. Scalato, if I may. In fact, as you are acting yourself, civic societies, NGOs, they are continuing their effort to convey outside voices to the general people of North Korea. But the authorities are tightening control over the people's access to information more than ever. Under this background, beyond the UN framework and including civic society initiatives, what forms of multilateral cooperation could be pursued in the future to open a window of opportunity to address human rights, particularly for the resolution of the abduction issue? That would be my question. And also to Mr. Hina, if I may. You are working at the Seoul office, and your actual feeling. What is your observation about the human rights situation in North Korea or the authorities' attitude towards the human rights? Have you observed any changes, or do you see no changes? And in the setting of the United Nations, do you see changes in the position of other countries under the background? In order to make progress in terms of human rights issues of North Korea, particularly about the abduction, what do you think about the role of the United Nations and the role of the office in Seoul? These would be my question. May I invite Mr. Scalato, please?
Professor Nishino, indeed. First, information is of the essence. The only ones who can bring change to the DPRK are its people. The only way to empower the people of the DPRK is through information from the outside world. The people of the DPRK must hear 4 fundamental narratives: their own human rights situation and the violations occurring despite international obligations the DPRK has assumed through UN membership and through acceding to several human rights treaties. The story of the outside world, especially free, democratic, economic, and cultural powerhouse Republic of Korea, the corruption and opulent lives of North Korea's leadership, juxtaposed to the plight of ordinary people, plagued by endemic human insecurity, and the deep rift between the Constitution and official ideology of the DPRK and the actual state of a country overwhelmed by a chronic humanitarian crisis. Like-minded states that have taken a step back on information campaigns aimed to reach the DPRK people must retake the high ground they once held. The content, the talent, the technology, the networks, the drive, and dedication are out there. What is lacking is political will and resources. Second, a country-specific international civil society coalition is needed, an international coalition on abductions by North Korea. The coalition should also involve NGOs that hold UN ECOSOC consultative status. Coalition members could endeavor to raise awareness through virtual and in-person events and publications. Coalition members could strive to rename streets and areas close to DPRK embassies after the names of abductees. The coalition could also support efforts to address the abduction issue within both a multilateral and bilateral context. Third, civil society organizations could actively campaign to forge public-private partnerships with private sector entities that may display interest in investing in North Korea in areas including infrastructure development, the extractive industry, and tourism. Silence can no longer be the price paid for doing business in North Korea. The resolution of the abduction issue and other human rights concerns, alongside CVID, must be prerequisites of principled engagement with North Korea.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scalato. May I invite Mr. Hina, please?
Yes, so as I mentioned earlier, the human rights situation in the DPRK remains dire. It really does require a fresh approach, a creative approach. We say that, but more than ever now, this is essentially what the High Commissioner called for last year. He said no other population is under such restrictions and surveillance in the world, and that if the DPRK continues on the current trajectory, the population will be subjected to more suffering and repression and fear that they have endured for so long. And forced disappearance is one of the biggest violations in this landscape. There have been some nominal improvements. Some SKPs have talked of improved treatment and detention. The legal framework is clearer. There are constructions of new housing and health facilities. The lack of food is a bit less the problem than it has been in the past. And we see a renewed interest in the government and engagement with the UN on human rights issues, as I mentioned, both the mechanisms as well as our office, we engage with them. So it's a dynamic situation that should provide opportunities for engagement. Amongst member states, from where I sit, we still see a focus on the issue of human rights in the DPRK, particularly looking at voting patterns in the political bodies of the UN. But there's a lot of claims for attention these days in the international landscape. Hence, the importance of events such as one we're having today to keep the focus on DPRK. For us in the UN, as ever, it's simple. Our focus is on improving the lives of people in the DPRK, on stopping violations, and on bringing a remedy to those who have suffered from violations. This hasn't changed. And again, I'd just like to underline that the DPRK's slow and partial reopening after a long period of closure should bring new opportunities. Along with their renewed engagement with the UN, it indicates a willingness to engage. And what we need, as the High Commissioner says, we need an off-ramp from the misery of the past decades.
ヒーナー所長ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, Mr. Heenan. Time was limited, but we were able to conduct a discussion on how to open a window towards the earliest possible resolution of the abduction issue. And thank you to the experts for sharing your insight with us. We truly hope that this discussion will open up a window that would lead to the earliest possible resolution of the abduction issue. I now give the microphone back to the MC. Thank you.
Professor Nishino and all of the panelists, thank you very much indeed. At the close of the symposium, may I invite Ambassador YAMAZAKI Kazuyuki, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary Permanent Representative Japan to the UN, for the closing remarks. Ambassador, please.
Distinguished representatives, speakers, panelists, and participants. Thank you all for the insightful and informative discussion we have had today. I would especially like to thank the distinguished ambassadors from the United States, Australia, the Republic of Korea, and the European Union for their strong messages of support. This broad engagement reflects a unified voice calling for an end to this humanitarian and human rights violations, strengthening the international call for the immediate resolution of the abduction issue. We also heard heartfelt testimonies from families from Japan, the United States, and Thailand. Their stories and perseverance through suffering remind us of the sanctity of the individual human lives that are at stake regarding this issue. I'd also like to sincerely thank the esteemed panelists for their deep and thoughtful contributions. Their knowledge and experiences are crucial in shaping our strategy and broadening understanding. To conclude, I reiterate Japan's unwavering commitment to exerting every effort toward the immediate resolution of the abduction issue. We must further strengthen our engagement and collaboration toward our shared goal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador YAMAZAKI. This concludes the United Nations Symposium on the Abductions issue. Thank you for your kind participation till the end of the program.